So Robert, if you're watching on YouTube, then it's going to be a different link, and I'm going to put that in the chat.
Okay.
All right, so I put that link to you, and we'll see. All right, well, hello and welcome, folks. This is not our usual start. I had some trouble with our streaming software OBS, so yeah, we're hopping on a different live stream now. Hopefully, you folks are able to follow us here. I see some folks are joining. If you are on this new stream, well, congratulations, you found us. And do put a hello in the chat box as you always do. Let us know where you're joining us from. Well, so those troubles aside, we do have something really interesting we wanted to talk about, which is around failures and failing. And this is a topic close to my heart. And one of our Pro Plus members, Grace Teo, she has been a big champion of failure. In fact, she ran a regular session for a long time, and it was titled Celebrating #Fail. And we all enjoyed that. And it's transformed to something slightly different now. But yeah, failures can be great because what I've seen is that success is often a very poor teacher, right? I mean, if I do something and I'm successful, I'm like, oh, cool, look at me, I'm so awesome, right? I mean, and I just move on. I never stop and pause and think. Failure can be a great teacher. Now, of course, there's a slight distinction there. So sometimes we're like, oh, I failed. And then we start with a judgment and we're like, oh, I'm not good enough, I can't do this. Guys, give yourselves a break, put all of that aside, and instead of that, just look at it objectively and see what lessons can you learn. And that way, a failure will never be a failure. So today we're gonna have three stories for you of failure. So here we are. All right, so cool. So we have some folks on. Lubomir is here. Hi. Manish says hello. So I'm gonna keep my story for the last. Ian, Raul, who would want to kick us off?
Ian, I don't know.
All right, yeah, let's go with Ian.
That's all right. I gotta. You guys are a little blurry. There we go. All right, problem solved. Okay, I'm gonna try to do justice to this story, and I should preface it by saying, man, I don't know whether to call this one a failure or a win or something in between, but it definitely had elements, right? That I look back on and go, man, I'd do that differently, right? So I think it fits the bill. So let's see. I guess, to start with, when I take on a client, I'm usually looking for one of two things to happen. Either, we become strategic collaborators and continue to work on what are their most important strategic growth initiatives. And we do that, kind of knocking one thing down, another thing comes up, we knock that next thing down, right? But it's what are the most important things that are, holding us back from a growth perspective. Or I solve one thing for them quickly and it feels like, a one-shot home run, but it feels really good and everybody feels great about it and they're ready to refer. And neither of those things happened in this, right? So that's part of my framing for this was not a full-on success. Okay, so here's the background. This company had a payroll process that had a lot of sales, bonuses, and lots of other things that kind of needed to be calculated besides just an hourly payroll process or whatever, right? And they had been, commissions, a lot of commissions, right? Lots and lots of records, really too many for human consumption. So they had been using a process that had kind of evolved over about 15 years in Excel. And they likened it to, it's not pretty, but it works. It's like the Ford F-150 old truck that's rusted and, kind of gets the job done, but it rattles. And anyway, that was kind of how they felt about it. But it had been honed over 15 years to something that at least worked regularly. And in order to work, it required about 9 people every week to do something specific. If you're the CFO and you're on the beach, you still have to do your part that week.
Oh boy.
The other person
brings back a lot of memories.
Yeah. So, they were excited to tackle it, but at the same time, they had some other people try to tackle it before, including like, Salesforce, Einstein Analytics, kind of, weighty folks, data sciencey folks, right? And honestly, if I'm honest about it, that was part of the excitement to me. Was like, oh, I could solve a problem that somebody else probably smarter than me couldn't solve. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
Hey,
so,
we've all been there, man, with
oh
Power
yeah,
BI, where you walk in after there've been a team of highly paid consultants who sometimes made a total hash of things, right? And then you go in
yeah,
and okay.
yeah. And
Yeah.
I mean,
So
they
that's
they
great.
had
Yeah, that's
had
a great
those kind of
setup.
failures. Yeah, they had good failures before where they on this where they'd paid a lot of money and gotten no value out of it, really, according to them, right? So, and they weren't super into Agile, but they kind of accepted it a little bit because there was a relationship with a management consultant who was kind of bringing me into it. So that relationship was enough to kind of bridge the gap. I think they normally were more fixed scope and hold your feet to the fire, just culturally, but they were willing to give it a go. Okay, so the first it was kind of three legs, right, that we were going to do. We were going to tackle this really technical challenge, then we were going to do some reporting, and then do some higher level reporting. And the first leg, we kind of did a good process analysis. My brain filled up. We got in there. We did the technical bit, and I'm like, okay, whew, the hardest part's over. I'm exhausted. There's sort of a question of, okay, should we put this part into production now? Right? The CFO, in theory, at this point, doesn't have to want to do their part from the beach anymore. But if I put it into production now, we've got 8 other people that still have to do their part. And I'm like, do we want to change all their processes, or do we just want to keep going and do that next bit and then put the whole thing into production, like once it's more end to end, right?
Yeah.
So I kind of glossed over with the client, like, hey, there's this option over here, but that one totally sucks. So let's go this way, right? And they were like, okay, cool. Glad you're making fast progress. Let's go this way. I get it. I didn't kind of give them the option, really, though, if I'm honest about it, and so now we're into part 2, and part 2 is we've got the reporting doing, in theory, what it seems to, I should say, we did not do a nice process analysis before we've rolled into phase 2. We just were kind of like, oh, I think it's right there. It's sort of in sight. The hard part's done. No. The next part is where you've already got this existing report. You do another report, and now you're running them in parallel, and they don't say the same thing, right? Lots of reasons they don't say the same thing. Half the reasons are because the way they were doing it before, maybe didn't make sense. The other half of the reasons are because I missed something, this week, okay, everything worked fine last week, all good. Oh no, wait, now it doesn't match again. Why doesn't it match again? Well, we had this one-off thing that we only do in X month.
Yeah.
New rule, new business rule that like discovered lots of those.
Oh my God, yeah. I'm so nervous right now because it totally I had totally forgotten about this.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So this is actually, I'll get to the lesson in a minute, but
but hold on. This is fun. Yeah, let's stay here. Maybe we can all commiserate
You're describing every day for what we've experienced.
Yeah, but the funny thing is that I've forgotten about this. So the phenomena that you're describing is that you step in as the Power BI consultant, and all fingers point to you. I mean, and it's that was only part of the reasoning for you, but I remember not once but a few times, and sometimes quite painfully, the problem was in their systems, in the underlying systems. The problem was already there, and all I did was shine a torchlight on it. But now all eyes were on me, all fingers were pointing at me. It's like, what did you do? Right? I mean, these numbers don't match, or this is wrong. And I'm like, I'm just a messenger, right? But it does become a problem because they're looking at you now. It's your report, and it's broken, and it's false, and it's wrong. And of course, initially what happens is that they're ready to kind of throw you out, like the skeptics, right? The skeptics in the group. Maybe you have a sponsor who's a little bit sympathetic, like, yeah, we keep going. But everybody else is kind of resistant to change, this external party. and yeah, they're saying, oh, the whole thing, right? I mean, they would point at one thing and they would just throw the whole thing away. And you're like, whoa, boy, I can't believe I've forgotten that stuff. So Raul, you've gotten a taste of this too, huh?
Absolutely. No, I'll again, like you finished, because I now you got me roped in. I'm waiting to see what happened, but similar. Similar. I'll share mine with you guys. Similar, but absolutely. Yeah. And it's great to hear. Awesome. So I'm not alone in that.
Oh man, I'm so surprised. Yeah. All right. Cool. So let's move on to this story.
So I know to expect this to a certain degree, because I've made business cases for large projects, software projects, and that kind of thing. I know there's this parallel thing that happens, right? I'm expecting it, and I'm at this point I'm still I'm exhausted from getting it to this point, but I'm like, okay, just a few of these cycles, just a few. We'll be through this. Hey, executive sponsors, you can kind of fade out now because we're going to be down on the details.
Yeah.
And I'm working with now a controller / operations manager, very direct and to the point.
Yeah.
But also, good human. Like, our kids go to the same schools.
Wow.
Decent,
good.
decent,
That's
but
awesome.
Sharp, right?
Yeah. Hey, and it seems to me I'm getting this visual of you kind of rolling your sleeves and like you were ready to kind of dive in, get in the trenches and figure it out. Right? Figure it all out, right?
Yeah.
All right.
And so, we kind of go through and just each week we're discovering something a little different. Yep. We fixed that thing, but now there's something different. We fixed that thing, but now there's something different.
The whack-a-mole.
A combination. Huh? Whack-a-mole. New little upstream data issue. New business rule that we didn't discover because we didn't do great discovery, like, honestly, and I'm not sure that they could have even expressed them all anyway.
Exactly. But that's a great point.
Because they were just, it's like muscle memory for them from doing it so long, right? Like, you couldn't just ask them, how do you do this exactly? You just have to, like, some of that has to unfold. Okay. But it went on for a long time.
Yeah. But there's also a contrast there, right? Like, they were in a mess. It was painful, but it was their mess, right? And I think that's kind of human nature. I'll take my messy stuff anyway, versus the promise of something like, right? I mean, so however painful that was, they were used to it. They owned it. It was theirs, and they were clearly okay with it, right? But now with this change, it's not theirs. And even if it's somewhat better, I think it's like, the self-driving cars. The funny thing is that self-driving cars, think about how many accidents caused by human drivers, right? Quite a few if you look at the percentage wise. But man, self-driving cars, they can't just meet that threshold. They can't just do that. If they do that, nobody would allow self-driving cars if they had the same proportionate number of accidents. They have to meet a much higher standard, much higher standard, right? Every single mistake is vilified. So, oh my God, the self-driving car. Well, what about the human jerk who was driving drunk, right? So I think we are in a way put in the same situation. Ooh. All right. Keep going, Ian. This is great.
All right. So it took, months, like each week, kind of going down there. Their office is maybe like 25 minutes away. But like, I would kind of get it to this point the night before, late the night before. Okay. Get in the car, probably a little sleepier than I should be to drive down there. Like, get through the day's vetting for a couple hours. Kind of, be so tired by that point that I remember all of it just barely, having the notes down and everything, come back, have to put it away for like a day or two before I could even like bring myself mentally to kind of take that next step with it. Right.
Wow.
And so anyway, it went on for a while. And during that time, we're still, we're still billing them and it's still going on. Now we're rolling into early March of this year.
Yeah.
And they have been like, the reason for them taking this on was because they were trying to grow and they couldn't hire fast enough. And they needed the person, like some of the people who were in this process, to get out so they could really focus on hiring well and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And now the external situation has changed. So just as we're delivering like the final, yeah, you know what, it's been great for 2 or 3 weeks. We've still continued to vet and everything, but it's good. Whew, full on COVID, right? And now they, for the last maybe 2 weeks of it, have been in the, oh my gosh, are we going to have to lay off a bunch of people mode, right? They're like, that's their mindset has shifted 100% because they were in such a public venue, right, of what they're doing. And meanwhile, they're getting our last couple of invoices for this project, which probably doesn't feel great. So, you know, and you know, there were other things along the way where, like, I can just, so anyway, let me back up. Delivered, does what it's supposed to do, but now they're a much smaller organization, right? Now they've since restarted, and I have given, you know, free consulting time to kind of get them back up, get a couple of new rules that have happened. But I don't know, you know, I hope that their business model is strong in the future, but I don't know, because a lot of things are shifting digitally, right? And so that'll remain to be seen. You know, that I think time will tell with that.
And that's the thing, right? So I always think about kind of what Stephen Covey talks about, right? I mean, the circle of control versus circle of influence versus stuff we don't control or influence. And so we can only focus on, I try to focus on the stuff that I can control directly, influence where I can. So I mean, you did your part, but I mean, what we do can be an instrumental part of a business transformation, but there are other factors and we can't control all of that. So man, what a story. Go ahead.
I was just going to say but I think one of the things that I really appreciate about Agile, right? Is that it can reflect that situations change all the time. Right? And I feel like one of the lessons for me in this was I had this opportunity to put value out, and I chose to wait because I wanted to put more value out all in one lump. You know what I mean?
I know. It
so
sounds
that was one.
Good. And you, I get what you were feeling, right? When you said it, I'm like, I've felt that so many times. Like, I'm so close, you know, I'm going to do it in a day. And well, a day, a month goes by and you're not done, right? So you can get caught in that where I want to finish it, right? I feel that.
And then at the same time, you know, I think my exhaustion in, you know, in kind of getting through some of those things, just made me less enthusiastic about other projects, about, you know, other clients. And so just personally, I go, okay, was it a win? You know, now would I do the same project again? Knowing what I knew then, yes. Knowing what I know now, no, probably not. You know what I mean? But that's okay. That's what you learn from it.
Learning.
There's a few points here. So now, on the very first call with a prospective client, I'm feeding them the Agile stuff. I'm really spoon feeding them. I don't know. I mean, because I think that really helps set the stage, right? So they're like, oh, how are you going to build this? And I'm like, well, sure. If you want to do it that way, we can do it that way. It would probably take a month or more to get the requirements down, and I'll be interviewing with people, right? And that's an old school approach, though. And you've probably seen the results of that. You've probably engaged in those kind of projects, and then everybody kind of questioned the results after that. Or Power BI is a new tool, and it's a new age tool, and we can use it in a new way, which is the Agile way, which is we just identify the MVP, minimum viable product. So I try that. I try my best. And of course, it's about educating the client. It's about, kind of being able to guide yourself as well, because again, we get pulled towards things as well. We get the fear of putting out something that's we feel that it's not perfect. It's not all done. That fear is real, although, it's not valid, right? So that's the thing. So Agile, I think, does help. What else was I going to say? Raul, what do you think about what came up for you?
Similar, as I was saying, similar. I'm glad to see. I'm not the only one that has done that. Let me see. Mine was a similar situation. Well, similar, let's say.
So hold on, before you get to your story, like did something come up for you for Ian? I don't know, like a thought or.
No, but what you said about trying to get into it too quickly and not dealing or looking at the processes, not mapping it
Yeah.
out. Absolutely. Like trying to get a quick win. I completely feel that you want to
Yeah.
show them something quickly.
But how
And
do you balance
that,
that? So,
that,
uh,
that
yeah.
exhaustion that you were talking about,
Oh God.
I have felt it. And it is, I think that there's no, it doesn't matter how much, if you look at, say, if you were to say, well, at least I made X amount of money, that's exhaustion and that off-putting, it's like, oh God, I have to do this again with somebody else. It doesn't have to be like that, but that has happened to me, where
Yeah.
that, oh God, not again, Power BI, no, not to that extreme, but
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
it is very detrimental
Yeah.
to get into something like this. It really
Yeah.
puts you off of it,
So
and I have
just,
felt as well.
yeah, just to have some fun, I will contrast this with the exhaustion from the old days, right? So I think the new stuff is nothing compared to that. And I think one of my favorite stories is when I was slogging away late in the night with this monster Excel file. And those who work in Excel know that, right? If you're trying to work fast, obviously you have lots and lots of formulas, right? I mean, you take a formula and just fill down, right? So you drag it down, so it's filled with formulas. And man, when you're trying to work really fast, they slow you down because it's like, oh, recalculating, and then you gotta wait. So of course, what I did was I turned that off, and I was so smart. I felt so smart that I knew the setting how to do that, how to turn that automatic recalculation off. And now I could fly through the sheets and I could do everything. And I did the whole thing and I sent it out and I forgot to reactivate, recalculate. So the whole thing was bogus, right? So this was whatever, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the night. And I'm like, phew, finally done. Tomorrow, big presentation. I'm sending this to my boss, of course. And of course, I come in late the other day. And my boss is like, dude, you let me down. And I'm like, oh, shit. Yeah,
Funny
I'll
enough,
take this stuff.
that just happened to me yesterday, Avi, with
Oh,
Power
really?
BI, because I, with a Power Query, I had something that I'm cleaning, and
Yeah.
there are a lot of interconnected queries. So I changed the setting in Power Query that to load previews in the background and parallel loading of tables. What
Yeah.
ended up happening was with Tabular Editor, when you upload, you're doing some changes and putting in some new formulas. If you press save, usually the stuff shows up in your Power BI model straight away. It wasn't, and I couldn't understand
Oh.
why. I spent like 3 hours. It was because, to help myself, and now I know, I had turned off some settings, some similar to what you're describing
Oh
in
boy.
Excel. And I was going crazy. I 3 hours
Yeah.
walking around in circles until I figured that one out. So,
Yeah.
oh, I hear you. Absolutely.
Great. Great. Oh,
Well,
Ian. Yeah, you had something to
I've
add.
got maybe my main two takeaways, right? One is, and they're related. One is that I was solving a problem that already had a solution. And we've talked about this
A
versus
solution.
solving a
Maybe not
problem
the
that,
ideal solution,
yeah,
but
but
it
it had a
was
solution
working. Yeah. Yeah.
versus something that
Oh, that's a
didn't have a
great point.
solution, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not saying you don't get around to those
Hmm.
problems that have a solution, but
Yeah.
they are not the first one for any engagement with any client or any startup. Like, go solve a problem that doesn't have a solution. Way more
Yeah.
valuable, way less
That's,
painful.
yeah.
And you get to do 80-20. And that's the other lesson, right? Is like, I got on the wrong side of the 80-20 because this was an every week to the penny, right? And so the first part of the project, cool. The last
Yeah.
part was that last 20% that takes 80% of the effort, right? And that
Yeah.
was the part that was long and exhausting and not fun. I mean,
Yeah.
we got there, but not fun, right? So don't get on the wrong side of the 80-20. And you can avoid that more often than not by picking problems that are about, doing the right thing more than doing the thing right to the penny, right? So
Yeah.
that's my take.
Great. What's the second one?
Oh, that was the two. They
Oh,
were
okay. Yeah.
Interconnected.
So man, this is so awesome because so one of the lessons was that, and Raul called it out as well. Of course, Ian, you said it, that he hadn't studied the processes enough. and that can help. Well, man, how do you balance it? Because obviously, I mean, in this case, you found out the hard way. I mean, yeah, right. But then I've seen people who like companies come to me and they're like, "Oh, Javi, we're ready to adopt Power BI. In fact, we're halfway through." And I'm like, "What does that mean, halfway through?" It's like, "Oh, we had cataloged all of our existing reports. There are 629 reports, and we're about close to getting 300 of them migrated." And I'm like, "Oh my God, just somebody shoot me."
For next week.
Well, that's one of the worst ways to move to Power BI. It's yeah, right. I mean, so I always say, forget about the existing reports, look for the shining beacon project. And that's very similar to what Ian, you just said. And the three things that I look for are, it's something hard or impossible in the current world. It's easy to do in Power BI. So I look for that combination. And of course, number three is that it's valuable. Because if you solve something hard, it's easy in Power BI, you solve it. But then if nobody cares about it, then it doesn't matter. But if you find these all three, for one, you're going to be done quicker because you focus on something that is easy in Power BI. And there's so many examples. I mean, just somebody struggling with more than 1 million rows, right? I get that all the time. Oh, yeah, we got 2 million rows and it's big data and we can't handle it. And I'm like, yeah, you're good. Yeah. Yeah. Check in with me tomorrow, right? Or later. Yeah, give me an hour, whatever, right? I mean, and time intelligence and so many other things. So if you can find that hard and impossible in the current world, easy in Power BI and valuable to them, that's what I always seek. And I don't always get it the first time, right? I mean, we would do a project and I'm like, okay, we thought it was that, it's not. But then we try again and again, as long as, I'm still working with the client. And I know it just by the reaction that we start getting. So usually I'm working with a sponsor and man, and I did these two combinations and I love both of them. So we are showing this project or my client is showing it. And then people go, whoa, how do you do that? Man, I know you've nailed it. I know that's a shining beacon, right? That's it right there. Because they are not going to stop talking about it. And then it just catches on like wildfire. Then you don't have to sell Power BI. And that's what I love about this thing. The best way to sell is not to sell, just show it, right? So how did you do that? Well, how did you do that? Or if, for example, we're showing it for like the North America sales team, then all of the other sales teams like, can you do that for us? And I'm like, yeah, nailed it. So, yeah, that's a good stuff there. But, oh gosh, I'm not sure I even asked that question. How do you balance that? Like you Ian, in hindsight is 2020. So now you can say that, oh, I should have studied the process better. But then there are folks at this other end, which are like, yeah, we cataloged, we spent 2 months interviewing everybody or whatever and cataloged these 629 reports. Where's the balance? How do you find the balance?
Yeah. So to me, it's one cycle, like a week's worth, maybe as much as you can keep in your brain and a little bit more on a scratch note. If you've gone much further than that, then it's going to be wasted because you're going to learn something else by the time you're ready for it. And we did that. We actually did a good job of that, maybe even because the management consultant, his was more in project management and more waterfall-y. So we did a little bit more upfront discovery on that first piece of the process that I'm usually comfortable with.
Yeah.
And we made up for it by doing none in the second part.
Great. It all worked out.
Probably good to at least a week, right? That's my sense.
Yeah. So, oh man, that's crazy. All right, Rahul, I think we're ready for your story, man.
I think
this has been a blast already.
We've covered, and I'm going to touch on pretty much everything that you've said. A thing that is important, I think, and touching back on I think the last session that we did, and with Ian as well, is niching down. If you get into a type of job that you've never done, or you might know of it and Power BI can do it, but it's not you're not a SME, you're not a subject matter expert on it, or at least know it. You won't find the pitfalls. You won't be able to spot that. Oh, hold on a minute. What this part should be important in this type of projects. Who's doing that? Is it being done? And you don't find that somebody, as Ian was saying, down the road is like, oh no, we forgot that. Margaret in accounting every 3 months changes something.
Yeah.
So something of that sort. So let me see. In my result, the result in the end was we're going to start using it and we'll get back to you, kind of like, don't call us, we'll call you, and, crickets from there on. And it was a very early on simple project. It was looking at sales, but I all of the things that we have spoken about, I take, not getting, and some additionals, not getting, not mapping it properly, not seeing what things were. A mistake I did, and now I don't do, is like, I didn't have a strong enough sponsor. It was somebody that was trying to get the big sponsors to convince them. So, if there was pushback, it was very difficult to get over it, to get around it. It was a fairly big company, so a lot of the pushback was from IT. They produced a model that wasn't well done. Everything was pivoted. On the days, each department had a column for their data instead of pivoting, and they simply would not change it. So not getting a strong enough sponsor and getting into something where there isn't a strong sponsor straight away. I didn't map things enough. I did. So I'm looking at, like things that I've looked at. I had a list of things where things can go wrong. I didn't really find out exactly what was their pain point. I knew generally and developed something relatively simple initially, because we were trying to do an MVP and a proof of concept. What I thought would be useful to them, overly complicated, millions of little KPIs and graphs in 1 or 2 pages. I didn't think enough of the UI, how to navigate, how to filter down something. People start clicking things and then go back. They don't know how to go back to the main thing. So overall, it wasn't well mapped. I didn't think too much or ask them what was it they needed, and it wasn't very easy to use. So in the end, what happened was, I saw every video on how to add all the bells and whistles to this report with clicking things, and look at this, look at what it does, it filters this and that. It was so complicated that unfortunately, when it came to sharing it with the heavy hitters, it was just too complicated. There was a lot of information in there, but
can I say something really quick? I'm getting a feeling, and I have been down this path before, where the person you were working with was leading you on a bit, right? Where I'm one level removed from the people who would actually be using the report, but the person I'm working with, if they keep telling me, oh, add this, add that, then I don't know. I mean,
no, that one in particular, that I have had that happen, but no, in this one in particular, it was me. I looked at the stuff that I have to do. This is great.
Accountability.
Look at this button.
No,
I have to put my hand up and say, like, this one was, it was 95% on me. To a certain degree, the other person could have said, like, oh, actually, but it's difficult. Like, as you were saying, I'm supposed to be the one that really knows. But no, that was one of the early on. And so, of course, like I said at the beginning, okay, we're going to start using it. And if we have questions, we'll get back to you. And I did a couple, like 2-3 follow-ups. And, it's like, Raul, it's not working, crickets. So the takeaways from that has been, no, sorry, you go ahead, Avi.
I was just going to say, so folks, Robert is keeping an eye on your questions, and we're going to switch over to Q&A, hopefully in about 10 minutes, 9:45 mark. So we're definitely going to address your questions as well. Just be nice to Robert if you want him to pick up your questions. All right, great. So we're on to the lessons. So go for it.
Okay, so straight away, a couple of things. Niche down. Look for projects where you have a good working knowledge of it. Hopefully it is your very strong niche, but there's no point in looking at something you're like, I know Power BI can do that. We know with Excel you can address any type of project. This is Power, if a Power BI, something that does numbers, you can address it. There's no point that you won't give them too much value. Okay. I tend to work with my clients as a sounding board. We feed off each other. I've been in their shoes. I can look at it from a clear perspective and add additional value, not just the Power BI part of it, but the big process. Stay, look at something that is within your niche. Find out the processes, as we've discussed, like really find out. I drive two things very strongly: agile, as you were saying, or we were saying, and the fact that the ETL, the initial rather, sorry, mapping and setting up the model, guys, it's going to take a while. Obviously try to do it as quick as possible, but do drive it to them, guys. This initial process is very dry, but it's key. So getting high level sponsor, making sure that I'm working with a high level sponsor. I won't work into a low level, not low level, but somebody that doesn't have decision power. I've realized it's halfway doomed. And not focusing on the user interface, not focusing on keeping things simple. I used to have a boss. I used to say, "KISS, keep it simple, silly," or whatever. Make sure that you're delivering what they need. Talk to them. Again, not assume. I always mention, I think it was General Electric, and they made a big shift on their approach. They used to have the engineering department develop these crazy cool products. Engineering wise, they were out of this world, but do people need this? Do they need a button that does X, Y, and Z? They didn't know, but they would produce it, and 3 years developing, and then they would tell marketing, okay, go and create a hype for this. We need to sell this. So give them a couple of 2-3 things. I think this will work for you. My experience has always been, once people realize the power of Power BI, they had never asked for certain solutions because they didn't know it was possible. Once they start doing, once I bring to the table 2 or 3 things, it starts to roll. And work directly with the client. So those 3 things: not getting a high level sponsor, not mapping things properly, and not getting exactly what they need in an easy to use product. For me, those are key.
Great. So, hey, before we go any further, I would underscore the same point that I started this call with, which was, guys, failures are the best teachers. If you don't learn to kind of fall in love with your failures, it could be a bumpy road. And again, right? it does feel like a setback, but the quicker you can get into the mode is like, whoa, it didn't work. And then you I don't know, approach it with some curiosity. It's like, what can I do different? How can I do it different? So, Ian, I don't know, what came up for you as Raul was sharing his story?
Yeah, let's see. Keeping that connection with the senior sponsor, I think, is critical. I started with it, and then we got down into the details, and we kind of lost that connection for too long, right? Much longer than I would have expected. What was the other one? There was something
Man, I took notes. I wrote down.
Looking down at your hand.
Okay. Think about it. Yeah. Okay.
I got it. So this one wasn't one on this project, but I've seen it a number of times, and it does inform my approach to first projects. I don't like the word dashboard for a first project, especially because it implies multiple different controls on the same page.
Wow.
And while people like the idea of that image, the actual way that works is usually too much for them if they're not familiar with Power BI. Like the things start to filter each other the wrong way, and they get stuck and they get frustrated with that. So you kind of have to go through this phase where you've got something that has, more standard Excel looking report, but with 1 or 2 charts, and so it's like a report plus, and they can see how it filters and they learn. And then as the organization learns, then you can kind of graduate up toward dashboards that are, helping them see everything's still on track. Oh no, wait, let me drill down from here and navigate. So dashboard, I think, is a caution word for me, especially early on in an engagement.
That's a very interesting observation. So of course, I'm thinking about that. This word comes with a lot of baggage, because people they likely do, preconceived notions of what is a dashboard. I don't think, right? Everybody, And of course, man, I mean, the more higher up you go in senior management, I think the crazier it gets. Like you have no idea what they think when they say dashboard or they hear dashboard. What's the visual that pops in the head? It's like, oh, it should look like that, right? And and yeah, so you don't know what you're catering to, and you can sidestep that by not using that word. And Ian has this creative solution. I think he's cool if you use it. So yeah, report plus, great idea.
Yeah,
and go that way.
I don't call it that. I just, I try to stick the toes.
Okay, well, I kind of liked it. Yeah,
I was gonna say I might start using it.
But yeah, I mean, and it's so yeah, dashboard can be tricky. I didn't quite think about it, but yeah, it's kind of a loaded term. People may have preconceived notion. So if you go, yeah, we're building a Power BI dashboard, then yeah, of course. One thing that I'll say, so guys, I'm going to switch to venting mode for just a minute, is that Power BI has bastardized the word dashboard. It's insane. It's like, why did you do that? Why did you have to do that? So what they call a Power BI dashboard is not actually a dashboard in the way the industry uses the term dashboard, right? So they have this thing where you take a report and you pin elements on this board, and that is the Power BI dashboard in quotes. But that's not what the industry definition is. And I'm going to follow Stephen Few on this. And if you look up the definition, how Stephen Few, pretty much So the authority on visualization, the way he defines dashboard is he talks about, he says a few things in there, but one of the elements is that something that fits on a screen. And the Power BI report is actually what comes closest to that definition, not the scrolling dashboard with an endless scroll. As nice as it is, I wish they had called it something else, like the wall, like a Facebook wall. It's something, right? It's newsfeed. I don't know what, right? But so so that's another challenge with this dashboard term. Like, I often, like, we do dashboard showcase and makeover, right? Every month. And I love that. But a common question I get is, Avi, I don't have a Power BI dashboard. I have a Power BI report. Can I still bring it to the dashboard showcase? And I'm like, oh God, I hate you. No. So okay, cool. So I'm gonna turn the venting off. So for Raul, what Raul said, I think what I love that part. So I wrote down two things. One was the initial part can seem boring to them, like the model. There's a lot of times it's grunt work. Now, of course. Man, I actually really enjoyed the experience of when I started working as a consultant, and this was all on site. And I don't know how we got into the mode of doing things that way, but that's how it started, and we just ran with it that way. Whenever we would do on-site consulting, it would always be the same approach, and we would like parachute in for a very short period of time, 2 days, 3 days, 5 days. That's it, right? And we'll be there for that whole duration, 2 to 3 days. That was the usual one. Pretty much locked in a conference room and just cranking away at this stuff. And man, we would leave whoever the other data gene folks who would be around me, who would be hanging out with me, like managers or, the executives, they would pop in and pop out. Like they would be at the beginning just to, whatever, chit chat, set expectations, and then they would check in once in a while on progress and of course come in the end. But they were, of course, their local resident, that company's Power BI folks or data folks, right? I mean, they sometimes would be Excel. And man, we would often leave best buddies after that. We would be so bonded. It'd be like one of those, I don't know, that speed movie, right? Where you're trapped on a bus or something. So it'll be a powerful experience. But it was weird. So, of course, I would be working on the solution and I always projected my screen out, which was so scary at the beginning. But the idea there was that when we were consulting, we also wanted to be training. We wanted to do the knowledge transfer to them. So not only would they see what I'm doing, but I'll also think out loud. And if you see me solving problems and talk Power BI, I almost can't help myself but think out loud when I'm solving problems, because that's what I did. Every week I was consulting somewhere. So I would put it up and I'll say, yep, I'm doing this now. And this is why I'm doing it. I thought about this approach and all that stuff. And, so that's what I was doing. But as Raul said, I remember one day on a 3-day engagement, like the first 2.5 days, I mean, of course, our data geeks were like wallowing and it was like, whoa, cool, he can combine this data from here. But, the managers would come in and they didn't know, right? I mean, they wouldn't react at all. And on the third day, we showed them stuff and they started clapping. And I'm like, what? Right? You know, I think that's the only time that's happened, but it was pretty cool. Of course, later I learned why they were clapping, because what we had pulled off in those 3 days, they had tried that before for a year with IT and maybe other consultants and stuff. Right? So that's why they were clapping. But yeah, but those 2.5 days, it was just right. I mean, me pulling data, me working in the model. So that's there. But man, I'm gonna maybe take a different take on the sponsor thing, because I've always had this thing for the underdog. And those who know my story, that I was within Microsoft, but I had to fight tooth and nail for Power BI. I almost lost my job, or I was ready to quit. I mean, it was touch and go. This story could have turned out totally differently, you know, if things would have gone that way. So, and in the end, what I had to do was I had to fly completely under the radar. I was told to shut down. I was told to shut down shop. Avi, no more Power BI, right? You're done. There's a BI team. We pay them millions of dollars every year, and you're making them look bad. Well, obviously they didn't say it that way, but I knew that's what was going on. And man, so I fought tooth and nail, and then I flew under the radar for a long time. I started working with really small teams and grew, and I would like try to have plausible deniability. Like my manager would say, like, "Oh, did you help with this?" And I'm like, did I? I'm not sure, right? So that's how I try to operate till the point where it was obvious that I had pretty much built a BI system, which was better, faster, more accurate, and all that, than the millions of dollars system that we were paying. So, man, since I'm always for the underdog, I feel very open, in fact, even tempted to engage with people who have no sponsorship, who have zero sponsorship. I don't know. I mean, is that crazy? Because you guys were saying that strong sponsorship is important, and I'm like, what about
maybe Ian?
Guy I like helping?
Yeah. I guess I've got a couple thoughts on it. One, I want to teach anybody who wants to learn. Mm-hmm. Right. So I am, like you, like as open as I can be about anything that anybody wants to learn, even if it slows down the process a little bit. That's okay.
Yeah.
Right. Number two is, a lot of my clients don't actually have somebody who wants to learn. You know, they might want to learn a little bit of it, but not into the depths of it. And so I can't make it about that if there isn't somebody who has that need, right, or that want.
And about the sponsor thing, like, would you work with somebody who didn't have a strong sponsor, or didn't have a sponsor at all? Right? What if they said, "Oh, we're trying to do this on the slide"? Right? I mean, I don't know.
For long. No, I don't think I would.
Really?
For long. Not in. No, I mean, I don't think that's a good consulting model. Yeah. I think that's a good training model.
Maybe,
sure.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
get you're more.
Yeah. Raul, would you work with somebody who doesn't have a strong sponsor, or in extreme case they're trying to work under the radar?
I would, but I would end up working with them at a personal level. You know, I want to do this in my company, and I'm doing this at the company, and engage them at a personal level, but not to come in as giving a service to the company. Like that example that I described, where the person that I was working with had convinced some of the higher ups to give it a try.
Yeah, it definitely sounded like they had a shot. Yeah.
You know, so it was very, very prime for what you said about being held to too high a standard. God, when something didn't go right, it was immediately like, I told you that stuff is too complicated. But I have worked with people that within the organization, and I still do, don't have a strong sponsor, but I work with them, and they're trying to show them, but I'm working with individual A, not working with company X. It's just, I don't know. I felt it I don't know. It doesn't work. It causes too much, annoyance and stress. And
good point. Yeah. So good stuff. So hey, I do want to take some questions. And what was I going to say? So I think, guys, the difference here is that the situation that I described, I was an employee. And hey, if you feel like you're the only one, then I hope my story can be an example and inspiration for you, right? That And again, I came this close to being fired or quitting. I mean, I was definitely ready to quit when told not to do Power BI. So if you are stuck in that situation, the way I decided was, you know what, if they're gonna, it might happen anyway, right? I mean, if they're gonna fire me, let them fire me, right? And I'll do this anyway. So yeah, I mean, of course, I'm gonna trust you to kind of make the decision, but I have come across these stories quite often where it just started with one person, and there might be some resistance, but in a lot of cases, it turns out great, right? I mean, they step into a leadership role. Cool. So hey, Robert, go ahead and turn on your webcam and share with us maybe some of the comments, thoughts, anything interesting that you saw, or questions that came up. I'll start with the last one. Elizabeth asking, what is a sponsor? So so I was the business analyst role, and I don't know, it was usually some manager, right? So depending on how big or small the organization is, in a small organization, in a really small organization, you really would want the CEO, right? The top person to be on your side, right? He should be open to this idea. And sometimes, of course, in small organizations, CEOs are the ones who bring us in, right? And you say, hey, this seems really promising. We want to do something here. In other organizations, it wouldn't be like the CEO, but maybe somebody in the C-suite, CFO, CMO, something like that. And again, we generally work with business side of things, not IT. I don't remember the last project that I did with IT. It's possible, but it's, usually we're working with business folks. And of course, you've heard me say it. I think business intelligence belongs to the business, not locked away in the IT ivory tower. And of course, in a larger organization or a different setting, it could be like a manager, whatever, director of finance, somebody leading a finance team or marketing team, sales team. And you need the blessing. So in my engagement, when I would be on site, this is the person who would walk in at the beginning and talk about kind of what they're looking for, what their aim. I'll share my approach a little bit, and then they would walk away, and I would work on it, and they would check in on me once in a while, and certainly at the end of the 2 days, 3 days, I would present all the work and kind of get their feedback. And of course, if you're continuing a project, then you would approach in a agile manner. So that's kind of the sponsor. Yeah, you need their support. You need the backing. Cool. Hey, Robert, what's going on, mate? We can't see you or hear you.
He's got a couple in the chat, in the Zoom chat, Avi.
Oh, okay. All right, let's see. If we can get you on, that'll be great. Yeah, I'll let you pick one from the chat then.
Okay, well, let's see. Elizabeth asked, what do you do when you fail on the deadlines? And so I think this is one that I feel pretty passionately about, is that Agile doesn't have a lot of deadlines, right? Occasionally, there's one you go, okay, that's achievable by then. Yes, I'll take that as a deadline. What it has as a higher priority than deadlines is priorities. This is the most important thing we can be working on right now as a company, as a division, whatever. And a back and forth about, I think this thing is hard or easy. Now, I recognize fully, and I've been in the position of the buying side of this, where I would rather have a much more defined answer than that, right? But I've been through so many projects where you can have an answer, it's just going to be wrong. So as upfront as you can, you just like tell that story of, yep, don't really do deadlines, do priorities. You can change the priorities, by the way. Like, so if we get partway in and it's not feeling like something else has changed, you tell me, like, we'll discuss, excuse me, let me put it that way. We'll discuss. And very quickly we can pivot to what would be a better priority than what we're working on. So that's the best way, is just try not to accept them if you don't have to.
I like that part. And guys, I think that word that Ian used, like, don't accept them, that is everything. So, man, I've been so obsessed with this idea of employee versus consultant. Like, is this life different or the same? And And I think that fundamentally it's the same. It's not, being a consultant gives you this freedom, right? I mean, everybody's, oh, I'm going to be free. And it's all BS. Let me just tell you right now, because freedom, it's about having control over your life, right? But control is predicated on you choosing things. So yeah, you can be a consultant and a client walks in and he says, yeah, no, we don't care about this agile thing. Give us this dashboard, give it in a month, give it us for $10,000. And you go, well, how do I say no to that? Well, right. So if you don't exercise that choice, you're not going to have that control. That means you're not going to have a life of freedom. So yeah, sometimes it can be tricky. And I'm not saying, right, hey, I've been in a situation where, man, I needed the money to feed my kids kind of thing. And yeah, if you got to do, you got to do. But again, it should be a conscious choice, right? So, yep, I'm choosing this because of my circumstance right now. So yeah, so that's, I know. I mean, I wouldn't enjoy working with a client who was totally opposed to this. It'll be painful for both of us. Awesome. Great. Let's see. So let's see what's the next one. So Matthias' question is, I guess, related. Let's take Kevin's question. Matthias, we're going to come to you in a second. Raul, what do you think about this? How to get buy-in from IT team? This is actually bizarre. So Kevin is asking how to get buy-in from IT team that favors Excel and feels you're out to take their jobs. For one, well, I guess it can happen. Usually IT teams has this big budget BI solution, again, millions of dollars every year, and maintenance, forget about how much it costs to develop, millions of dollars in maintenance. So I'm not sure about that part, favors Excel. That sounds kind of weird. Usually IT kind of stands out. But yeah, how do you talk to IT who thinks that we are out to take their jobs?
The main thing in general, I find, is to tell them, assuage that fears. Like, hold on, no, I don't want to take your job. I don't want to, be an employee. But explain to them, look, it's just the information I'm trying to get from you is to make things easier and to get off your back, so that we don't have to. You won't be getting calls from these guys all the time. Hey, I need more information. Hey, I need this. I try to explain. No, guys, I'm actually trying to make it easier for this part, so you can go and look at the service system and keep up with the system and look after much bigger and more important things.
That's right.
Let them know, no, guys, look, I've got nothing to do with systems. I've got nothing to do with the computers and the overall things. It's just we're trying to get information and make it easier to get it, and I don't have to call you once a week. Hey, I need a SQL statement. I need information. Now, as I said earlier, if there isn't a strong sponsor, and another thing that I've learned is to look for companies that are not too big, because they are too hierarchical, too rigid. They really don't want to. They want to be able to give an answer that is in a book, that is in an SOP. And what does the standard operation process manual say? No, just want X. So I went off into a tangent there, maybe, but looking at who to work with, I look for smaller companies, strong buy-in, that will be able to convince IT if need be.
Yeah.
If it is impossible and you are facing this situation, explain to them, look, Power BI, the extraction part is very little. I just want to be able to connect to it and get off your hair. And hopefully they'll see it and realize, no.
So again, guys, I mean, I always go back and forth, like employee versus consultant. Is it the same? Is it different? And again, it's both are true. In some case, there's no difference. In some case, it's different. I call it the duality, right? And both things are true at the same time. So, but Raul kind of hit on that too, that as consultants, we have the choice. I mean, we run into an IT wall. Sometimes we do. I walk out. Man, I have better things to do with my time, right? I want to focus my time where I'm going to make the biggest impact, right? Man, we're just, and I remember, I'm going to share this story. So I went into a company, and so either we were doing these consulting things or we were doing on-site training. That's how I started. And again, the training would also be very intense. And we would always use the company's data set to run the training, which was such an adventure because I had no idea how the class would go. And I would often like fail on this stage and all that stuff. So all that stuff happened. But oddly enough, usually in a class of 20 plus people, there would inevitably be these one or two people. And of course, we use the term data gene people who are just different, right? I mean, they would be more lit up in the class, would ask more questions, right? It was just like, man, I mean, yeah, I felt the connection with them. And there was this one gentleman, and this was at a healthcare company, who was so into it. And he told me a little bit about the friction with IT. He's like, oh, yeah, they wouldn't give me access and all that stuff. And I, tried to guide him the best I could. But then he kept in touch with me over the next several months, years, in fact. And I think for the first 6 months, the emails that I got were like, man, I'm kind of doing IT. I put this roadblock and that roadblock there. And it got so frustrating, right? And then he sent me an email. He didn't talk on anything about work, but the email was happy to the point where I like noticed a shift. And I'm like, dude, what happened? Right? You sound really happy. You're like, what's going on? And he said, oh yeah, I started working with another healthcare company as a consultant. And again, it's not the employer consultant thing that matters, but what he said after that. Because what he said was, it's amazing what is possible if you get out of your own damn way. Right? And yeah, I mean, IT, yeah, sure, they bring in with their fears and all, but if you let go, so of course, I definitely kind of agree exactly all the stuff Rahul was saying, and then I tried to do the same. Like, I mean, if they would talk to me, if they would listen to me, if they would be open to it, and I can't choose that, only they can, what I would say to them, my message would be that no, your role doesn't diminish. In fact, IT has a much stronger role in this new world than they ever had, right? Because they're not that waiter kind of getting people drinks, right? They're like, oh yeah, change this line chart to bar chart. No, right? They're now focused. They can now focus on the most valuable part, which is building the infrastructure, right? Building roads, not bloody, giving people rides on Uber, right? So, oh yeah, where do you need to go? Oh, that's, yeah, okay, I'll take you there, right? I mean, that's what they have been doing. And I know I've lived that life too. I've worked with those guys. It's exhausting because, man, business users are never happy. And it's so crazy because they ask for 100 things. They don't use 80 of those. Any IT department, like 600 plus reports, if you ask them how many are being used, shoulder shrug, fingers crossed, like maybe some of them. So it's not an easy life. And again, Power BI makes them more powerful, but they got to be open to seeing it. And sometimes you can't choose that for them. You can guide them, inform them, but in the end, it's going to be their choice. Cool. Let's take one more. Hey, Robert, what's sorry, put something in the chat. It seems you're on. Oh yeah, there we go. We can hear you now. Can we? Yes.
Yes. So we have covered all the questions. Other questions are about Power BI.
Yeah. Hey. So hey, I'll put you on the spot. So we were a little over time. Sorry, guys. But so Robert, tell us about your failure.
I would say my failure is also more towards what Kevin had spoken about, and also Marius regarding one, not having a lot of support from the IT team, and also sometimes I think the biggest failure I've had is over promising. I get very excited about a project, and I give deadlines that I think I'm going to meet, and then when I open up the database, there is just too much data cleaning that is needed, and I start sweating.
Yeah. And there's something there, because often when I look at the data on the surface, I'm like, man, I'll be done in a day, in a week, whatever, right? I mean, but then I always say real data is messy data. So it's the, when you step in and there are these tripwires everywhere. And of course, Rahul talked about it, and I loved his example. And that was so beautiful. It was like, oh yeah, Joanna in accounting does this every month. And yeah, nobody nobody ever mentioned that, and now nothing works, right? None of the numbers match. Like, oh shit, we needed Joanna, right? So there are going to be tripwires. So yeah, so Robert, I'm just going to say, man, you're not alone there. I mean, I've gone down that path so many times, because again, I mean, I would look at the data, I'm like, yeah, this is I know exactly how to do this. But then, of course, I run into things. So, of course, it's that classic thing, right? I mean, what you don't know that you don't know, that's what gets me. And I mean, I don't know. I mean, you can't quite fully 100% protect yourself against that. But I think having this agile approach, talking to your customer about the agile approach, and and if you have a reasonable customer, if you just talk to them and say, hey, look, this came up. I hadn't seen that. It hadn't come up in our meetings earlier. The folks that I work with are nice. And that's frankly, again, the choice thing that I'm talking about. Man, I work with people that I like. I work with people that I wouldn't mind hanging out with after work. Maybe that's a good note to end things on. So Raul, Ian, do you feel that way, or is that crazy?
It is. Funny enough, as part of the things that I had was that and even in this group, I think that we always gravitate towards the people that like-minded and similar, I don't know, humor or whatnot. But yes, happy. That is very important. I had in my notes things where things can fail, not having a connection, not resonating with a client. Mm-hmm. Now, at a personal level, and not. It's not that we're going to make plans to go on holidays soon, but we end up spending a lot of times with people on these things and in calls and going back and forth, and just having that personal connection to a certain degree is very important.
Wow.
So for me, it is very, very important. And I've realized that I end up with my clients is like, congratulate them on on birthdays, or, oh, your kid is graduating. Oh, I saw that. How did the baseball game over the weekend? It gets to that point. And it is very important because it is work. It's where we spend a ton of our day.
Oh, absolutely. Think about it, right? I mean, so now, of course, I have no idea how many hours I work, but in a corporate setting, man, you spend more time engaged with work, especially if you add in the commute we used to do, than you spend with the family. But Ian, what's your experience been? I mean, is it bizarre? I'm an oddity, or do you find this working with
super important?
You super like important. As well?
Yeah, super important that you like who you're working with. Yeah, and I think especially for me with the sponsor, that you're going to be agreeing about or agreeing with about what are the highest priorities, right? There's got to be some flow back and forth there to kind of figure those things out. So for me, one thing that I just wanted to kind of, one last point here was the sponsor can sign or can easily influence the signature of a contract. It's important from a consulting perspective, maybe less so if you're an employee. The sponsor can convene the right business users. They can get person from accounting that does this thing once a month into the same room with 4 other people from 3 other departments to talk about topic and do it again next week if needed, right? That's super important because I cannot do that on my own, right? And, and then 3 is that they're relatable, they're somebody that you can have those back and forth conversations without and figure something out together, right? So those are all key to me.
Wow. Yeah. So folks, that's a great note to end things on. And I was somewhat surprised when I kind of realized this, but the deeper I've gotten into technology, on the outside, it seems like this Power BI techie thing. And right. I mean, but the deeper I've gotten into it, I've realized that the deeper I've gotten in, the more I found that it's about people. And I love that. All right. Mm-hmm. So, hey, thank you to our guests, Raul, Ian, and Robert, for keeping in the chat, sharing us your failures. We are going to link to everybody's profile in the description. So you can find that there. You can follow them, connect with them on LinkedIn. And thank you for hanging out with us. We'll catch you next Friday.